Welcome to The Explainer. We're jumping right into a pretty big controversy that went down on The View. A new analysis is asking a tough question. Was a sudden turn to faith on the show a real moment of reflection, or was it a calculated PR move to get out of a really tight spot? And this is the quote that kicks the whole thing off from the YouTube channel WDW Pro. That's them finding their religion. Wow. That is a pretty bold statement, and it's aimed squarely at the hosts of The View. So, what on earth happened on that show to make someone say they just suddenly found faith right when the pressure was on? Okay, so it all begins with a segment that the source video calls exceedingly rare for a show like The View, this sudden, very public pivot to faith. So you've got the show dedicating a big chunk of its time to Christianity, to prayer, and to Lent. Now, on its own, you might just think, okay, interesting topic. But according to this analysis, the timing of this segment wasn't just interesting, it was incredibly suspicious. To really get why that faith segment raised so many eyebrows, we have to rewind the clock just 24 hours. Because the day before, a massive story involving Whoopi Goldberg herself was just about to drop. Right there, live on air, Whoopi Goldberg gets out in front of the news. She announces that her name is, in fact, in the newly released Jeffrey Epstein files, a total bombshell document drop that had the entire media world in an absolute frenzy. So let's just lay this out, because this sequence is the absolute core of the source's argument. On Tuesday, Whoopi admits her name is in the Epstein files. Then, on Wednesday, literally the very next day, the show pivots hard to this long segment all about religious faith. It's that 1-2 punch, that back-to-back timing that this analysis finds so telling. And this is exactly where the source video starts connecting the dots, linking two events that, on the surface, seem to have absolutely nothing to do with each other. The source basically puts these 2 days side by side. On one hand, you've got the massive scandal and controversy of the Epstein files. On the other, you have the piety and solemnity of a faith segment. And their conclusion? Well, they argue that the faith segment was a totally calculated PR move, something designed to change the narrative and distract everyone from the scandal. And this really gets to the heart of the skepticism. If this was really all about transparency, like she said, then why now? The source argues she could have revealed this information years ago when the story first broke, not, just hours before the documents were going to make it public anyway. But the analysis doesn't just stop there with The View. It zooms out and argues that this incident is a textbook example of a much larger and much older pattern of behavior you see in Hollywood. The argument here is that there's this sort of culture of protection where damaging information gets swept under the rug and kept secret for years, until it becomes absolutely impossible to hide anymore. And to prove their point, the source brings up some very specific and very public examples. I mean, take this moment, which the source highlights. This is an older clip of Whoopi Goldberg defending the director Roman Polanski. The analysis presents this as Exhibit A in a long pattern of Hollywood figures protecting their own. And it wasn't just Whoopi. The source also points to this infamous clip from an awards show where you see Meryl Streep thanking Harvey Weinstein and even calling him God. This was long before his public downfall, of course. This is used as evidence that insiders often protected and even praised these powerful figures for years. So all of this brings us to the final piece of the analysis, which circles right back to the very specific way Whoopi Goldberg chose to defend herself about her name being in those files. The source found this defense to be, well, just bizarre. You have to remember, the entry in the Epstein files was just about a staffer asking to borrow a plane for charity. It never once suggested there was any kind of personal or romantic relationship. So her denying it was really strange. And this is a question that's at the heart of all the confusion. Why are you defending yourself against something that nobody even accused you of? Her denial seemed so completely disconnected from the actual facts that it led the analyst to ask one final, very provocative question. And that's where we end up, with this lingering question from the source. By defending herself against something nobody was even talking about, does it suggest there's maybe more to the story that hasn't come out yet? It's a question this analysis just leaves hanging in the air for all of us to think about.